Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. Welcome to Italy. I am at ABB in Valdarno, which is in the Tuscany region. And there's so many awesome little electric cars around here. Cars we don't even get in the US, which is super jealous. And a lot of Tesla's CCS charging because we're in Europe. I am here with ABB seeing some of their facilities. This is a brand new facility they built here with where they manufacture DC fast chargers and show off interesting technology like this electric Volvo right there, which is kind of a proof of concept really, because of the way it can charge with that. So let me take you on a little tour of the outside. I could not film anything in the inside, which is a bummer, but it's okay. But I did get to interview with the CEO and ask him a few questions about the sustainability and future DC fast charging, and just kind of had a good time. So I'll show you what I can show you on the outside, and then stay tuned for the rest. So this is an electric Volvo that's kind of a proof of concept, just showing ways to charge giant vehicles like this, and that is one of them. They call it opportunity charging. So basically a bus could go to a bus stop for like 3 to 6 minutes while that thing ascends down, touches the top of the bus, and charges it at really good, probably 300 kilowatt speeds for 6 minutes, which does something. I mean, it's not gonna full charge it. It's just like a charge and dash. So essentially, if you have that at a lot of different places, then you wouldn't ever have to like worry about charging the bus up full except overnight, which is pretty cool. So this is something they can theoretically test that with, and this is just so cool. I wish I could drive this thing. Another option, of course, is the depot charge box, which is another way that you can charge these trucks and buses at their actual depot. It'll charge slower at the depot, but that's okay because that's where it's sitting for longer periods of time. This thing is just so cool though. Here's another ABB unit, similar to what we have in the US. And over here they make chargers for Ionity. We have them at Electrify America. Here's an e-tron and a Tesla that they use to show off this brand new Terra 360 unit. These can actually charge 4 EVs at once, or 2. I imagine you could do 3, but yeah, it's up to 4 EVs at once, and it load shares. So this is 360 kilowatts at its peak. I believe that's at 500 amps, and it can load share, so it can do 2 at 180 or 4 at 90. And from what I could tell, it's dynamic. So if one car, if you're charging 4 cars and one's only charging at 20 kilowatts at the top of the pack, then another car could take the extra juice. So not sure how all that logic works, but this is really cool. And it even shows, like, as it's charging, this bar is the charging kind of symbol. So that bar will just go up and up, and there's a bar in each corner. So the 4 EVs would be showing off their charging status, which is awesome. Look at this smart car over here. ABB markings all over it. Really sweet wheels. Love that. Kyle, we should wrap the smart. Here's a Zoe. A Renault Zoe. Love this. Another car we don't get in the US. A Pro S. ID3, I think it is. Yes. Look at that. Looks good. Over there you have a Mini. A plug-in hybrid BMW wagon, of course the i3, and a Link, I think is what that's called, with the funky blue insets in the wheels, and that.
So what is ABB? Well, it's an acronym that's a combination of 2 other acronyms made from 2 companies with a lot of industry experience that combined and became like a joint venture. I'm losing you. If you want the whole story, it's on the internet in many places. Anyways, they have a lot of experience with manufacturing, electrification, and specifically they're known in the current world, at least in our realm of electrification and EVs in general, as DC fast charger and AC charging manufacturers. They have made more than 680,000 chargers since 2010, and 30,000 of those being DC fast charging, which is an astronomical number, especially in this growing market where some people don't even know what those are or the difference between AC and DC. In fact, they've doubled their production capacity in the last 2 years, despite this huge thing we've all experienced called COVID. So I'm here in Tuscany at their Valdarno factory, which last year made 80% of their global charging solutions. That's a lot. This is essentially like a kind of a grand opening to the press and certain members of their board and investors. It's kind of an expose of what they're up to and how they're getting along with their tremendous manufacturing concepts and testing and R&D. There's just so much here. It's a giant facility, and unfortunately filming was very limited, but they were gracious to provide some video of their own, which was approved, and so I will lay that over the top wherever I can as I talk about it. But it is state of the art. It's beautiful. I can actually see some of the Swiss infrastructure influence because ABB has a heavy Swiss background. I think that's where they're actually headquartered. And it also does combine some of the Italian elements of, say, the food and the coffee and just the culture, the gardens. They're beautiful gardens out here. And when we arrived, we got special key cards to grant us access in various areas. In fact, most doors were key card limited, so it is very locked down. There were a number of places we really couldn't go into because research and development, future products, you know, that kind of thing. But we got to see the factory floors where they showcase step-by-step assembly, most of which was highly technical circuitry, soldering, and final assembly and testing. They do have their own R&D section, of course, where they do pre-level architecture and CAD and all the early development. But when they are ready to start assembling some of the things they're designing, they have factory space for it. They also have extensive testing procedures. The test chambers themselves are fully enclosed for safety. They have all sorts of plexiglass and different safety measures and cutoff switches and emergency shutoff valves. But they can operate the chargers that they're testing in very, very cold or very, very warm temperatures. In fact, more cold or warm than they've ever really experienced in the real world. They test them for longevity. They'll do extensive charge cycles. They even have methods to basically plug the charger into a box, which the charger is being fooled. It thinks it's being plugged into a car. So it'll charge that box like it would a car at full capacity. I mean, 350, 60 kilowatt. And then the box is receiving the electricity. And actually this way they can test all the charging without throwing away electricity. I think it was something like 90% or more of it is actually fully recycled, which is really important for sustainability. Many of these testing chambers can handle over 1 megawatt of power, and with that in mind, they're trying to future-proof it because, you know, for now, what's considered really fast charging can be 250 or 350 kilowatts. We don't know what the future holds, and there's already testing with megawatt capabilities for, say, like semi-trucks or just big infrastructure needs, and so they had that in mind when developing this. I think the coolest looking room was kind of an echo chamber of sorts, where they can precisely measure the radiation coming off of a DC fast charger sitting on a turntable. And they have a giant antenna that basically points at it and tests every little nook and cranny on that charger as it's fully functioning to see if there's any sort of radiation emanating from it. The room is completely void of outside interference because of that, and it honestly looks like straight up from something of a mad scientist film. I love that. And the building itself has solar panels, of course, and high efficiency heating and cooling. They're trying to make it as eco-friendly and sustainable as possible. They even had a fleet of EVs available for employees to take advantage of. And after seeing all of their production and development, I felt the need to discuss some of the future of DC fast charging with their CEO of ABB E-Mobility. So I am joined by Frank Mühlon, CEO of ABB E-Mobility. And we are here at the E-Mobility Center of Excellence in Valdarno. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
In Italy. Beautiful facility, by the way.
Thank you.
Very good. Saw a lot of good charging infrastructure out front. So I wanted to talk to you about the sustainable future for DC fast charging. What are some ways you see kind of branching into, you know, everyone is widely adopting EVs, and some people's concerns are the infrastructure, and even charging at home versus charging at the office. What do you see ABB contributing with that, or just the future in general?
Yeah, so let me start very generic, right? So when you see the amount of EVs going up, obviously we need more infrastructure, which is a great business case for us, which is why we're here and why we're building new factories, etc. Now, the difference from AC slow charging or level 2 charging up to the DC fast charging, to me is no black or white. So you have simply different use cases. and you need for different use cases, different charging speeds, and have different needs. And then you can come up with different business models behind as well. So like on the, when you mentioned workplace, you mentioned home charging. So there is of course no point in doing that faster than you need and to stress out the battery more than you need. So obviously there level 2 is great, and also you don't have a better grid connection and so on and so forth. So that's the right thing, and we support that. Right, we offer level 2 chargers, AC chargers, not out of this facility, but out of a different one. So then you take your journey, you take a longer trip, and I think like we discussed earlier, a couple of us have driven down from the Netherlands to Italy, from Germany to Italy, Switzerland to Italy, by their EVs, because obviously we all drive EVs, right?
Yeah.
So 1,200 kilometers, 1,400 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, not a problem for nobody,
yeah.
right? But this is only possible because of the charging infrastructure which is in place. So like you have European-wide networks, like Ionity, for example, which is a good customer of us. So when you charge at those stations, one of our colleagues nicely said, the car and the charging was not the limiting factor. His body was the limiting factor, right? And I think this is the norm. So I think we are at this point where we can safely say that technology, both on the vehicle and the battery side, as well as on the charging side, has progressed to an extent that we can make seamless also longer journeys. The same is true for the US, obviously, with the Electrify America network, for example, and so on. What we need now is a scale up.
Yeah.
Because when we have more vehicles hitting the road, if we do not increase the amount then of these chargers and charging sites and charging hubs and whatever, then of course we run into issues.
Yeah.
So and that's where we can play a role to your question, is by coming with facilities like this, enabling to produce high quality chargers in scale. That will help the overall market to drive in that direction.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the future proofing of the charging networks because of the scalability, but then you also have the different capacities of cars, and I mean that's where I guess Terra 360 comes into play, because it can charge up to 4 cars at once. Of course, not all 4 of them at the high speed, but that's a interesting product, because I feel like that's what people need is more charging. It's still early days, relatively speaking, especially in the US. We have maybe 3% adoption right now. But we are having sometimes a line to charge, and that's what scares, I think, people who are waiting. They're hesitant to adopt EVs. But yeah, like what do you see as the future-proof for the charging networks? Like how do you guys future-proof also in your development?
Yeah, I mean, it's future-proof is first of all to install the right level of power which you need to give the right charging speed. So when in former times this was a 50 kilowatt charger on a highway was sufficient. I mean today you don't really go to a 50 kilowatt charger on a highway because you think it's useless, right? So you spend too much time. However, that same 50 kilowatt charger is a great charger in a neighborhood or at a shopping center. So it really depends again really on the use case. So it's not good or bad, and faster is not always better, but for that use case it's better. And the other is how can you enable the maximum amount of cars charging, because that's like you mentioned, the 360 with 4 outlets. So yes, it cannot give the same speed to all 4 cars, not 360 to all 4, but if you can 2 times 180 or however you want to split it. But the thing is, when you then look at the cars and how much the cars can take as a charging rate, and you look at the charging curves, then you quickly realize that for a lot of cars 160, 180 is enough. And so we see now that like I would say like a year, 2 years ago it was like 100 peaking for most of. Now it's at 160, 180 We got a few cars like 230. So we see it moving in that direction. Yeah? So would also say a pure 150 kilowatt is also not enough. So this is why we rather went for 180. But I mean, it's now philosophical questions, right? On how, what is the right one? And we're talking about a very, very high charging speed already, because it gives you, I mean, we say with the 360, I mean, if you make the math, if you assume the car could take that, which is not really the case for one car, but if you assume that, and you assume an average consumption, then you can get 100 kilometers in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's roughly the equation. But even if you get that in 6 minutes, I mean, how long does it take you to get out of the car, to get yourself a coffee, fresh up, and come back? It's I mean, 10, 15 minutes is nothing. Yeah? And in that time, you have another 200 kilometers of range added easily, and so it almost becomes seamless.
Yeah. So how dynamic is the load sharing of the 360? Like, let's say you have 4 cars plugged in, and one drops to 20 kilowatts at the top of the pack. Does that let another one take more than 90, or is it always limited to 90?
No, it depends on the let's say power sharing logic which is applied. So we can do different logics. We can do a kind of static share, or we can do a dynamic sharing. And the dynamic sharing, obviously, that can be like FIFO principle, or can be an equal share. And it all boils down at the end of the day to the power modules inside, and this is 30 kilowatt modules.
Yeah.
You know, so based on these 30 kilowatt, you can switch.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's a cool product. And then another big question a lot of our audience wants to know is, we drive we've put probably 400,000 kilometers on EVs so far. A lot of road trips. And how, I know you manufactured the equipment, but is there a way to incentivize the installations and the managers to keep them the uptime? Because we sometimes run into issues with maybe one station being down, and there's one station near us at our office that's been down for like 6 months. And how do
so hopefully not an ABB station.
How do you incentivize the people who are operating it? Because you sell the station to them, it's no longer on you.
Yeah, that's a very good debate, Jordan. I mean, we also we also break ourselves up in our head somehow how to do that, because at one time, I mean, for us as a manufacturer, we're selling equipment.
Yeah.
We're also selling the service to it, but not everybody is taking it up. And the same is we have our chargers, we have them cloud connected, so we get a lot of data. But then again, to actively use that data is also, some operators do, some don't. And of course, what we cannot do is sell the equipment, not getting a service contract, but then still looking that everything is running. So that doesn't fly. Yeah. So we have a few cases where maintenance is not very well, and so it's not good for us, it's not good for the operator, it's not good for the driver. So however, for the let's say for the larger networks, and here we usually have very, very close collaboration with our customers. And the best case is if we take the service, because our service engineers are trained. What you also don't want to have is that some third-party service organization is servicing, is kind of the man in the middle, and if something goes wrong, then everyone blames the other, right? In that triangle. So that's not good. It's much better if you have a one-to-one relation. And if you have really can make sure, also as a manufacturer, that your service personnel is well trained. And even if you use external, but you can certify that and make sure. And then the other point, which if you mentioned downtime, so which also happened to us in a few cases. So hope not to charge around your corner, but in all fairness, also happens to us. And sometimes it's simply spare parts you cannot get because a certain control unit might be broken, and now you need a controller, you need a chip for that. That chip has right now lead times like hell. So you compete with this spare part against another part, Okay, so usually we prioritize the spares because what is already installed needs to run. But if you have sites like with 6 chargers or whatever, and then 5 are up and running and 1 is not, so that's probably not as severe as in other cases. So
yeah, it'll naturally be better as we grow with more chargers, because you know, kind of like a gas station. If I go and it doesn't work, I'll just go down the street. But if you're on a road trip and you go to the one EA station, it's a nightmare. But yeah, when do we expect 360s in the US, do you think?
yeah, we started in Europe with it yeah, it was very, I say the market demanded this more than the US market. I think we look at it next year for the US, 2023.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to use them and try them out. And we charge every EV on all of your chargers. So really appreciate your time, Frank.
Jordan, thanks a lot.
So as we can gather, the future of DC fast charging is very interesting, and we're going to see a lot of change in the coming years, maybe even months. And it's important to understand the technicality, even at a high level. There's so many terms that people just don't necessarily know off the top of their head, but I think will become fluid in our vocabulary as we grow the expansion of DC fast charging networks and electric cars in general. Sure, the Terra 360 can output 360 kilowatts, but there's essentially no current car that can accept that, which is why it's beneficial to have the load sharing, the dynamic capability to send 180 kilowatts to one, 180 to another, or 90 kilowatts to 4 cars, or somewhere in the middle with various cars and various levels of their charging curves. And in general, higher numbers sound better. That's something of a marketing spiel that everyone likes to use, is the bigger the number, the better it is. But it's not always the case. I myself had an example taking Kyle's Model 3 to a mall, and I put on the charger, did some shopping, went to the Lego store, of course, things of that nature, and I had to cut my shopping short because the car charged too fast, and then I was going to be sitting on a charger with high state of charge, taking up someone's spot, accumulating idle fees. That's really not ideal. So ironically, it's not always the fastest charging that is important. Actually, I think some of the sweet spots could be either 50 kilowatt units or 35 kilowatt, maybe even some AC charging that does 10 or 20 kilowatts, where you could go enjoy a movie or a few hours at a shopping center, and your car will charge with a useful rate. I'm not talking 3.6 kilowatts. I think we're gonna start seeing some of those phase out unless you're maybe charging a small battery overnight at home. But for the general shopping or around town infrastructure, even at work, I think 10 to 20 kilowatts really could be a sweet spot. And ABB is developing all of these numbers, which is great. They're not focusing entirely on the highest possible number DC fast charger. They're thinking of everything, because you don't want to overstress the grid when you don't need to. What do you see as interesting challenges or potential solutions for a world that is gradually embracing more and more charging infrastructure? And what do you think of ABB? What would you like to know about ABB? We're looking forward to working with them more in the future. Personally, I can't wait to get Terra 360 statewide, but we're hoping to spend some time with the Terra 360 over in Europe very soon. But anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys in another video very soon. I'm going to eat.